thank you for joining me here at Why the Book Wins, where I compare books with their movie adaptations. My name is Laura, and today I am celebrating the end of season 2 of Why the Book Wins. So I have been doing book versus movie comparisons for the past 2 years, and today I'm looking back on season 2, and I covered 53 episodes in the past year. So I'll be looking back on those and talking about the best and the worst, all of that good stuff. By the way, if you want to hear my season 1 recap, I will link to that, and you can see what I had to say about 1 year of book versus movie. My anniversary is August 12th, 2020. That is when I posted my first ever episode comparing The Stepford Wives by Ira Levin with the 2 movie adaptations. So pretty crazy that this has been going on for 2 years now. And yes, it was 2020, so this is a COVID baby, right? Like so many things were created during COVID when we had all of that extra time and didn't know what else to do. But yeah, my first year of doing Why the Book Wins, it was just a blog and a podcast. And when I hit the 1 year mark is when I was like, where do I want to take this? And that is when I decided to create a YouTube channel as well. So my YouTube channel is 1 year old, whereas Why the Book Wins is 2 years old. And I'm really glad I started the YouTube channel. It's definitely a lot more work to create videos and to edit the videos. It takes way more time than it does to edit a podcast, but it is so rewarding, and I have absolutely loved being on YouTube, and yeah, it's been really fun. So as I said, I covered 53 book versus movies this year, which is insane. There's 52 weeks in a year, so I've done 53 though. And I did take a week off here and there, but it still ended up coming out to 53 because there were multiple times when I released 2 episodes in 1 week. So specifically, like when there was a new release, I would release my usual book versus movie, and then the new release would be like a bonus episode for that week. So I did that quite a few times. I think going into season 3, I am going to take maybe a couple more weeks off than usual and sort of like force myself to take breaks because I just get so excited about this, and when I plan to take a week off here or there, I just don't end up doing it, or then I release 2 episodes in 1 week because I just can't wait, and I don't want to parcel them out, But I'm gonna try to hold myself back going into season 3 because I'm not experiencing burnout, but I'm worried I will if I don't force myself to slow down, So having said that, I already know in September there's 2 weeks where I'm gonna be releasing 2 episodes in 1 week, but after September, I think I will try to slow things down a bit and not do the 2 episodes a week, and maybe even take a week off here and there. I also think I'm gonna go back and re-record some of the ones I did in season 1 because they're only available as a podcast. It's just the audio. So I think I'm gonna go back and re-record them as a YouTube video as well. So the good thing about having this as a blog is I have it all written out in blog form, so I don't necessarily need to reread the book or watch the movie again to refilm them because I can just go off what I have written down. However, it is a good excuse to reread some of those books that I had really loved and to watch those movies again. So I also think I could improve on some past episodes, so recording them as a YouTube video gives me an opportunity to improve because I think I've gotten better at articulating myself. And there's also past episodes where I wish I would have delved deeper into certain topics instead of just kind of brushing past them and just not trying to analyze it as much as I could have. And I think part of that was just insecurity, feeling like I didn't know how to analyze it, and yeah, just feeling insecure about my opinions. Whereas through the last 2 years, I think I've gotten better at just owning my opinions and not feeling self-conscious about them, And that's something I still struggle with, where I worry about offending someone if I don't like something, and then if I do like something that a lot of people don't, I suddenly get self-conscious and I'm like, well, I liked it, but everybody is saying it sucks. So do I just have bad taste or something, So I'm getting better at just owning my opinions and not feeling self-conscious about them. And yeah, I think I've gotten better maybe at analyzing things a bit as well. So yeah, I'm going to go back and refilm some of those past episodes that are only available as a podcast. So before getting into, my personal favorites and the best and the worst and the weirdest and all of that stuff, I would like you to comment down below if you were brought to my channel or to my podcast by a book versus movie video. I want to know which book versus movie brought you to my channel, as well as which book versus movie has been your personal favorite that I've done. I do think you can tell when it's a book or a movie that I really loved and was more invested in, because I think it translates into a better episode a lot of the time. So anyway, comment down below which book versus movie episode brought you to my channel, brought you to my podcast, and also comment down below which one has been your favorite, that you found the most entertaining, that you found the most informative, the most helpful, and so on and so forth. And I also want to give a shout out to the guests that I have had on in the past year. I've had quite a few, so I've had a lot of family members on, which I love. Having family on is so cool because it's like a photograph but an audio photograph, like it's this memory, this audio memory that we can look back on years from now. So I just love having my siblings on, and my dad came on. And so yeah, my sister Paisley came on for Little Woman. My dad was on for The Hustler. Another sister of mine, Trudy, was on for The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. And then another sister was on for Where the Crawdads Sing. So that's been really awesome. I do have plans to have my mom on and another brother on later in this year. I have a big family, so I haven't even had all of my family members on the show yet, but I have just 3 more. And then at that point, I will have had everybody on. But I also had some non-family members on this year, which was a huge step for me and my show, and a huge confidence booster that other people wanted to collaborate with me. So that was just so incredible, and I feel so grateful. So the Forgotten Cinema podcast, I was on their show and we discussed In Bruges, and they were on my show and we discussed The Double by Jose Saramago, which was adapted into the movie Enemy. So that episode is split up where I just talk about The Double, and then Enemy is like a second part to the episode where we discuss Enemy, because the Forgotten Cinema podcast didn't read The Double, they just watched the movie Enemy. So in that section we just talk about Enemy. But yeah, it was so cool having them on. And then I also had Ink to Film on. I was on their show and we talked about Smooth Talk, which is based on the short story by Joyce Carol Oates. And then they were on my show to talk about Secret Window, which is a Stephen King adaptation. But I am just such a huge fan of Ink to Film. They do the same thing I do, comparing books with their movie adaptations, and I just love their show so much. I had been listening to it for like a year before having them on my show, and I was on there. So that was just so awesome, and definitely check them out. Check out Forgotten Cinema podcast too as well. I love what they do, and their episodes are very entertaining and very informative, and they definitely, Ink to Film and Forgotten Cinema podcast. You know, I talked about how I feel like I'm not the best reviewer or analyzer of books and movies, and so I like listening to their shows because I think they're better at it, and I think I learn and grow from hearing how they are analyzing movies and books, you know? So anyway, definitely check out their show and check out the episodes where they came on my show. And then I also had Shannon Hovey on to talk about Dark Places, the Gillian Flynn novel. Shannon Hovey is not only a booktuber, but she is also a published author. So that was so awesome. She has a book in the works right now, so it will be coming out at some point. But the book she has out now is a novella called Sent September, which I really enjoyed. And yeah, it was so cool having her on for Dark Places. So definitely check out her YouTube channel and check out her book. So moving on to my favorite books that I have covered in this past year. The first one won't come as a surprise. I've read it twice and I loved it both times, and that is Misery by Stephen King. I don't want to sound like a broken record, because if you're familiar with my channel, you know I talk about misery a lot, but I just absolutely love it so much. I love the character of Paul and just his vulnerability. And then I love Annie as a villain. And of course, Annie represents addiction, which gives this book a whole new layer to it and so much more depth and meaning. And it's just such a powerful story. And like I said, it's just very special to me and I absolutely love it. And it's also just a great horror story where there are parts that are genuinely scary and disturbing. And there's parts where, like one scene in particular, I was eating popcorn as I was reading and I had to stop eating because it was making me feel kind of sick. So this is just a fantastic horror story, but it also has so much depth and so much more than just that. And it's honestly just such a beautiful and inspiring story that I would highly recommend to everybody. I mean, maybe not everybody, because as I said, it is like a horror story and has some disturbing graphic scenes. But if, you know, you're okay with that, then yes, you should read this book. Next up, The Shining by Stephen King, which I also absolutely loved. This one is so creepy, so unsettling, and it's a terrifying look at alcoholism and the cycle of family violence. And the characters are just so well crafted and so well rounded. And this book deserves all the hype it gets because it was fantastic. Again, it is pretty scary and creepy. And honestly, some of the more upsetting scenes aren't even supernatural. It deals with Jack and his dad. There's just like such a chilling scene when we see a flashback into Jack's childhood. But anyway, love this book so much. And then Beloved by Toni Morrison was incredible. So not only is Morrison just such a talented writer, and it's just, she has beautiful prose, and then it's also written in a way where it's so technical and you have to be such a skilled writer to pull that off. But it's a really hard book to read as well. It's about trauma, the trauma of slavery, and it's also based, I mean, slavery, of course, is a true thing, but it's also like the events with Setha are based on actual events that Toni Morrison read about in a newspaper. And so it's just so horrific, and it's a ghost story. Yeah, it's just so well written, and it has some great characters. You know, Setha and Beloved are really interesting characters that I liked reading about. Again, it is like a hard book to read, read. But Paul D and Denver are like, I just loved Paul D so much. And then Denver's character arc was amazing. And just, I don't want to get into spoilers, but anyway, this is a fantastic book, beautifully written, incredible characters. It is difficult to read, but it is a great look into trauma. And it's, you know, like I said, it's about trauma, about slavery. And I don't want to undermine that, but it also works towards, you know, just a person's trauma and how they deal with it, regardless of what that trauma is. Yeah, highly recommend. Incredible book. And then Sometimes a Great Notion by Ken Kesey. This one is just a great family saga. And again, it is written in that same way Beloved is, where it's just very technical, where we're jumping from perspective to perspective and jumping from different timelines constantly. And it's not like broken up in an organized way, but it's done so well where like you're not thrown off and confused by it, and it just flows. And the characters, again, like I've realized through the last year, I guess, that character development is like the most important thing for me when it comes to a book. Like, even if the plot isn't anything that intriguing, if we have interesting characters that I want to be reading about and that I want to get to know and to understand, whether I like them or not, like that is what makes a great book for me, is having these characters that are just so real. And we get that in Sometimes a Great Notion. And it is also a really interesting story. And I like how nobody is painted as the good guy or the bad guy. So I like that as well. Aside from Joby, of course, who is just like the most genuine, wholesome character I have ever read. But he felt real too. And I absolutely loved his character. But yeah, Sometimes a Great Notion. Fantastic book. And then The Power of the Dog. This one held the title of Best Book of 2022 up until like June, I think. So for like 6 months straight, The Power of the Dog was the best book I had read all year. It is fantastic. The ending will leave your jaw on the floor. And again, fantastic characters. And I was so invested in each and every one of them. Yeah, I absolutely loved it. I want to read this book a second time for sure. I keep saying that, but I'm definitely going to read it a second time before the end of the year. And it's not that long. It's like maybe 250 pages. So definitely worth your time. And it's also pretty funny too. So I liked that. Moving on to one that isn't funny, and that is The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks by Rebecca Skloot. This book is just so jam-packed with information, but it's told in such a compelling way, and it keeps you engaged the whole time. And it's a true story, so that I think gives some extra points to some extent. Like, I just felt like I was learning so much while I read this book. And it is a very sad story, but there's also a lot of beautiful moments within the Lacks family that help kind of balance that out. And again, she goes on a lot of tangents, but each of them like fit the story, and each of them are just so fascinating. And I read this one twice as well, and it was just so good, so incredibly written. It's creative nonfiction, so even though it's true, it's written as if it's a novel. But yeah, incredible story, highly recommend. And then we have Jane Eyre. And now I don't often read romance, but when I do, I read it in the form of a gothic novel, which has a lot of vampiric imagery and ghostly imagery, and that has a heroine who is just my personal hero, because Jane is incredible and I love her so much. That was me trying to make a play on that meme where he's like, I don't often so-and-so, but when I do, so-and-so and so. Anyway. And then lastly on my list of favorite books that I've covered, Bullet Train. So my book first movie for this came out last week. And if you follow me on Instagram or Goodreads, or if you watch my Bullet Train video, you know how much I absolutely loved this book. It was funny, it was entertaining, it was exciting, it was heartwarming, it was everything you want in a book, really. And the movie was fun, and I would recommend seeing it in theaters, but the book is definitely better. And yeah, I just had so much fun reading this book, and it was fantastic. I can't say enough good things about this one. And now on to my favorite movies. And these are movies that I think were better than the book they were based on. And I actually made a video for this. So I made a video talking about 11 movies that are better than the books they were based on, if you want to check that out. But the ones I talk about in this, some of them are the same. But also in that video, I also talk about ones that I had covered in season 1. So some of them aren't the same that I'm going to talk about right here. So there's some overlap. So you can watch that video if you want to. So the first one I'm going to talk about is Joe from 2013. This movie does not get enough attention. Like, more people should be seeing this movie. It was so fantastic. The book is really good too. And so much of what makes the movie great is taken directly from the book. But this is one of those where, as great as the book is, just seeing it played out on screen and the performances, I cannot say enough good things about them. You have Nicolas Cage for one, and Ty Sheridan, but also the guy who plays Wade, I forget his name now, but he had never acted before and he's incredible in this. And there are some like scenes that will just give give you goosebumps. Again, it's like a tough story because it deals with abuse and alcoholism, but it is one I highly recommend. It is so fantastic. And again, it's better than the book, in my opinion. And then we have The Green Knight, which honestly, this movie is such a masterpiece, and I could just watch this every day for the rest of my life and not get tired of it. Maybe. I probably would get tired of it. But basically, this is one is so rewatchable. Like, I saw it in theaters, and then like soon after I saw it at home, and I like enjoyed it just as much the second time. But it is just so well done. It is like loosely based on the poem. I mean, he stays close enough to the poem, but I love what David Lowery did with this story, and it has Dev Patel, who I love so much, and the like just the cinematography, and it's just so vivid and it's so creepy, but also just such a beautiful story, and I loved it so much. And I liked it more than the poem, even though I did really like the poem too. And then we have The Hustler, which is by Walter Tevis. The movie, of course, stars Paul Newman, George C. Scott, Piper Laurie, Jackie Gleason. And I like the movie better because the movie had more emotion. And you also get like incredible monologues by all that main cast, which they are all fantastic in this. Yeah, like I said, it's more emotional. Like there's one aspect of it, which is a spoiler, so I can't talk about it here. But that aspect just brings more emotion. And I think Eddie has a more clear character arc in the movie than he did in the book. And then we have The Revenant, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. It's so incredible. Again, similar to The Hustler, it was just so much more emotional than the book was. And it's just beautifully shot, and the performances are incredible. DiCaprio, but also Tom Hardy is fantastic as Fitzgerald. And it has a more satisfying ending as well, whereas the book, certain parts of it are kind of anticlimactic in my opinion, so whereas the movie isn't, and it's just a very satisfying ending. And last but not least, we have Matchstick Men, which I enjoyed the book, but again, the movie just elevates it even more, and it's just so much more entertaining, and it's funnier, and you get incredible performances. They make some changes to the story where it's a sweeter story in the movie than it was in the book. And usually I don't like that when Hollywood like makes something happier than the book had been. Like usually I like how books tend to be a bit more dark in some ways. They don't tack on the Hollywood happy ending, you know? Whereas Matchstick Men, I actually prefer the ending in Matchstick Men over the ending in the book. Moving on to book and movies that made me cry this year. So I am not one who easily cries. Having said that, you know, like I cry. I don't know what it was from my childhood, but I am so resistant about crying, especially in front of people. But even when I'm alone and when I'm in front of people who I'm close to and I love, I still like feel uncomfortable crying in front of them. Having said that, there are things that make me cry, but it's usually a big deal when they do. But anyway, so Misery made me cry because like I said, that story, just reading any story about someone who overcomes something like against all odds is just so inspirational. And when it's written like not in a cheesy romanticized way, when it's written like with that raw realness, that is like almost a guarantee to make me cry. And the end of Misery made me cry. And then The Lost Daughter, the movie, it made me cry because Olivia Colman's performance was just so vulnerable, and her character I think was more pitiable in the movie than she had been in the book. And just seeing that rawness, again, that vulnerability in her character, there were certain scenes that were just made me cry, and it got to me. By the way, that is a fantastic movie, and I highly recommend. The book and movie are both really good for that one. And then The Glass Castle is another one. The movie, actually, which I liked the book better. The book won in that episode. However, the book did not make me cry, whereas the movie did, funny enough. And it made me cry because it's a scene that shows how someone who is struggling with alcoholism, but they're a good person, and they like want to be a good person and to help people, but so often the addiction takes over and they just lose that goodness because they're a slave to their addiction. And so the scene in the movie that made me cry, which it was like strategically placed, they did a good job because we see a scene where this character who struggles with alcoholism, he does something good and he's there for someone. And it's such a good example of alcoholics who do want to be good, and those moments where that goodness does come through and they're there for you for once, right? And yeah, I just like it. Addiction is just so tragic, especially, you know, when the person isn't totally ruined by it and there's still some goodness in them that they're still fighting for. Yeah, anyway, so that scene in The Glass Castle really made me cry over that scene. And then Dr. Sleep, the book, made me cry. And again, Misery, Dr. Sleep, and The Glass Castle, all of these things that made me cry dealt with alcoholism. So I guess you can tell what I have been affected by personally and what therefore just really gets to me. Anyway, in Dr. Sleep, we see, you know, the character of Danny overcome overcoming his addiction and the cycle of violence within his family, because Dr. Sleep is a sequel to The Shining, by the way. And yeah, I was just so touched by Danny and him succeeding and being able to do what his dad wasn't. And it was just so powerful and so wonderful and so beautiful. And yeah, it made me cry because it was just so beautiful. And now moving on to my least favorite book that I read. So I'm going to keep the negativity to a minimum, and I'm only going to mention one. I thought of like a few. I think there were like 3 I had to choose between, but the one I ended up choosing was House of Gucci. So this one, like certain aspects of this book I really enjoyed, like the family drama. Like that's what I wanted to read about, the family drama. But we get so much of just the business end of things and the stocks and the mergers and whatever, and I could not care less about any of that. And I get some of that, it overlaps with the family drama, right? But she just didn't write it in an interesting way. Anytime it got related to business stuff, it was just a slog to get through. And I listened to this, I went back and forth. Well, so I had the book, the physical book, but it got to be like such a slog at times that I had to buy the audiobook as well, because I was like, I'm not going to get through this unless I can just listen to it on audio. So yeah, anyway, I wouldn't recommend this book. The movie isn't fantastic by any means, but I did enjoy it more than the book, even though the movie definitely takes some liberties. So if you don't want to read the book, but you want to know how accurate the movie was and what they got wrong, you should check out my book first movie episode for this one, because I think it turned out really well and I'm quite happy with it. And my least favorite movie would be The Snowman. So this movie is like infamously bad, and I would have to agree with all the critics and all the viewers in saying that it's just not a well done movie. And they also, like, I say it in the episode, but there were like 15 pages worth of script that didn't get filmed for some reason, and so there's just a lot of holes and things that don't add up. But I will say, like, I also did not love the book. So for me, the movie didn't even have a good starting place, because the book I didn't particularly like either. The movie was also pretty gruesome, and too gruesome for my taste, and so there were times when I watched it on my laptop, and there were times where I had the screen covered with my Word document because I was like, I don't want to see this. So it also wasn't my style in that sense, because, you know, I don't mind a little violence here and there to some extent, but this one was just like too gory for me. So moving on to the weirdest book/movie. So I love weird books, I love weird movies, I love ones that are just like, you know, the WTF ones where you're just like, what did I just read? What does this all mean? What is going on? And the weirdest book I read this year was The Double by Jose Saramago, which was adapted into the movie Enemy, directed by Denis Villeneuve, starring Jake Gyllenhaal. And the movie is definitely weird, and it starts out with a scene that you're just like, what kind of a movie am I getting into right now? So this isn't a movie I would recommend to just anybody, because also, if you're scared of spiders, you shouldn't watch this movie, but there's multiple things going on in it where I would pick and choose who I recommend it to. But the book I would widely recommend, because that one doesn't have anything like upsetting or triggering and no spiders. But the book is definitely one where, like, I thought I knew what was happening, but then you read the ending and you're like, you rethink everything you just read and everything you thought you knew. And I actually am pretty happy with my analysis that I did of this one, of the book in particular, so you should definitely check out that video. And not many people are talking about the book. Like, I was Googling and YouTube searching and talking on Reddit, trying to get people to ask people what they thought of this book, you know? But like, nobody really had much of a response, and so I was left to my own devices to figure it out. But like I said, that's one I'm pretty proud of, because I think I did a good job analyzing that book. But yeah, definitely weird, and I would highly recommend it. And now on to the book and movies that made me laugh. So Matchstick Men, the movie. The movie has Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell and Alison Lohman. So, I mean, Nicolas Cage and Sam Rockwell right there, like, of course it's going to be a funny movie, because both of them are just like so charismatic and so hilarious in anything they're in, really. Well, they're not always hilarious, but anyway, I love both of them, and they were so funny, and it's just a fantastic movie, and you should watch it. And then also Deep Water, the movie, which is a new release. It came out on Hulu in March. It had mixed reviews, but I really enjoyed it, and there were scenes that made me laugh out loud. In particular, just like seeing the married couple interact. So like, the story is about a married couple, but the wife is like always having affairs, but she like brings the guy over, and like they interact with the husband, and it's just this really awkward situation. But the movie had some funny scenes with like how the husband interacts with these guys she brings over. Yeah, I thought it was really funny, and I for the most part, really enjoyed this movie. And then Bullet Train, the book and the movie. But I do think the book was funnier. The movie had some things that like made me laugh out loud, though, I will say. But ultimately, the book I found funnier. And then on to the next category. This is the best pairing, where both book and movie are just perfect and I love them both. And with all of these in the episodes, I chose the book over the movie. So the book still won with each of these. However, the movies are still fantastic, incredible adaptations that I would highly recommend. The book and movies for these just complement each other so well. And if you love one, like definitely check out the other because you're guaranteed to love them both. Anyway, so the first one is Goodfellas, the movie, which is based on the book Wise Guy. Need I say more? It's Goodfellas. Martin Scorsese, Ray Liotta, Robert De Niro, the guy who plays the psychopath or sociopath. I'm drawing a blank on his name. He won an Oscar for his role though. But anyway, the movie is fantastic. It's a very faithful adaptation and I absolutely love it. But the book is fantastic too. And I forget the name of the actress who plays Karen, but yeah, they're just perfectly cast. But I definitely recommend the book because there are details from the book we don't get in the movie. And so I loved the book as well and would highly recommend it. And then The Power of the Dog, which you already know I loved the book, but the movie was like almost just as good. I still like the book better, but the movie was fantastic. Again, such a faithful adaptation and just it was just incredible and so beautiful and an incredible soundtrack, amazing performances. I absolutely loved the movie. And then we have Gone Girl, which again, I like the book better. The movie makes some fairly significant, well, maybe they're subtle, but they were significant changes in my mind. And so therefore I like the book better for sure. However, the movie is still a great adaptation and it's just incredibly shot and the performances are incredible. It also has some like super intense scenes, but they're just a great pairing. Even though I prefer the book, the movie is just fantastic. And then Anne of Green Gables, which I absolutely love. This is like the ultimate comfort read book for me. I just love being in Avonlea and in Anne's life and hearing about what's going on with her. And then the movie, the one from the 80s that was made for TV, starring Megan Follows, that one is an incredible adaptation as well. And I just absolutely love it. And they just really bring the story to life. And so even though, again, I like the book better, this is still just such a faithful adaptation and the performances are just so spot on. And now moving on to the second part of this episode, I want to just talk about some of the statistics of the past year. I find that interesting. Ink to Film does this on their yearly recaps where they share their most popular episodes and what cities they were listened in. And so I like hearing their statistics, so I thought I would share my end of year statistics for season 2. So the most played episodes. The most played episode in the last year was We Were Soldiers, which I had my brother on for, Joseph. But this one came out in season 1. But it came out in July, the end of July, so it came out right at the end of season 1, so it didn't have a chance to get much traction. So a year later, this has become my most played episode, which I was kind of surprised by because it's not like it's a new release. Maybe people just thought my brother had some really good insight and loved listening to it, so maybe that's why, I don't know. But so definitely check that episode out because it did very well in the last year. But the top 5 episodes that were released in season 2, number 5 is The Green Knight, which a number of these are new releases, though. So a new release is always bound to do really well, which is why I try to cover new releases. I'm also interested in what I'm covering. So The Green Knight, obviously, I absolutely loved. And then it just worked out well that it happened to be a new release. And so that works out well for me. So The Green Knight was number 5. Misery was number 4. Stephen King, always a crowd pleaser. Number 3 was The Road. And this one doesn't surprise me. The Road is, a favorite book and movie for a lot of people. It's a story a lot of people hold dear to their hearts. It's also by Cormac McCarthy, who is very well known. And this was requested by multiple people. So yeah, The Road was number 3. Number 2 is The Phantom of the Opera. This again, the movie, the musical is just so well known. So it makes sense that a lot of people wanted to hear how the book compares. I also compared it with the 1922, I think it's from, the silent movie adaptation with Lon Chaney. So I talk about all 3 in that episode. And then number 1 is Nightmare Alley, which I'm surprised I didn't talk about that in like the good pairings one because I love the book, but the movie is incredible too. Like definitely watch this movie, definitely read the book. And yeah, again, this was a new release. And once Nightmare Alley came out on Hulu, my episode really took off and it got a lot of plays, a lot of listens. And I think the episode turned out really well too. So definitely check it out. And so those were the podcast episodes that had the most plays. But moving on to my most played YouTube videos, the top 5. Number 5 is Misery. Number 4 is House of Gucci. Again, it was a new release. 3 was Deep Water, also a new release. Actually, like all of these but Misery are new releases. But yeah, so Deep Water was number 3. Number 2 is Death on the Nile, which was the Agatha Christie adaptation I talked about. And then number 1, Nightmare Alley, once again. Which, to talk about Death on the Nile, in that video, I said I was going to do a follow-up video where I watched the 2 other adaptations, the BBC adaptation with Emily Blunt, as well as the 1970s adaptation. And I did watch the 1970s adaptation. I didn't watch the other one, but I just never ended up doing a follow-up video. So I apologize because I said I would, and then I just never did. I just lost the motivation to talk about Death on the Nile. I guess I don't know. I did enjoy the book, but I just wasn't interested in talking about it more, I guess. So I just lost some steam on that one and never ended up doing a follow-up episode. So I apologize because I told people I would and then I never did. So I feel bad, and part of me is like, well, I still should. That way people don't think I'm dishonest or something. But then at the same time, I'm like, I just have zero interest in talking about it. So anyway, so that's that. And then for the highest podcast plays by country, so this isn't YouTube, this is just based on the podcast. But number 5, the country where my podcast is played the most, number 5 is Belgium. So shout out to Belgium. I have been to Bruges, so that's really cool. Number 4 is Canada. Number 3 is Germany, which, by the way, I am of German descent. So shout out to my homeland from a long, long time ago. Number 2 is United Kingdom, which again, I am from British descent. My dad is from the German side. My mom is on the British side. So got some my genealogy representation there. Anyway, number 1, of course, is USA, which is where I live. And then the top USA cities. So number 5, Salt Lake City, Utah. Number 4, New York, New York. Number 3, Phoenix, Arizona. Number 2, Ashburn, Virginia. And number 1 is Columbus, Ohio. So Salt Lake City is the only one where I have family that lives there. And I used to live there too. But the other 4, I don't have any connections to. I used to live in New York and Arizona, but I no longer have family there. So all of these 4, the top 4, I have no personal connection to, so they're just kind of random. But so thank you guys. It's a bunch of strangers out there in the world that are listening to my podcast, and I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the support. And every Wednesday when I post a new episode, I look to see the plays, the stats, and I often see some of the same cities that are listening every week. So thank you to my loyal listeners who listen every time I release a new episode. It means a lot to me, and I just really appreciate that. And so again, thank you to everyone who has supported me by listening to this podcast, subscribing to my YouTube channel. If you've shared it with others, I really appreciate that as well. And those that have donated money on buymeacoffee.com. I've had 2 people donate money on there, and that's been really cool. I do make money off the ads on YouTube, so thank you for putting up with those ads because it does help to pay to run this channel. Yeah, again, people who follow me on Instagram and people who have reached out and given me recommendations, and I just appreciate it so, so much. I remember when I first started this channel, the thought of having people reach out with recommendations that they want to hear me cover, that just seemed so distant that I would have anybody interested in enough, aside from family, that they would make recommendations, Yeah, I'm just really surprised, I guess, in some ways at how this has grown, and it just means a lot to me, the support I get, and I continue on going strong, going forward, and not to sound too whatever, but I'm trying to do some of, manifestations where visualizing and writing about having a channel that has, X amount of subscribers, and imagining success for myself with Why the Book Wins, because I absolutely love doing it. And if I could make a income doing it, that would be incredible. And anyway, I'm not doing it for the money though. I don't want to make it seem like it's all about that, but the money obviously helps pay to run it. And then if I was able to not just break even, but if I was able to make money with it, that would just be really exciting. So anyway, I plan on continuing doing this for a long time to come. And I appreciate you guys being along for the journey. And before I officially wrap this up, I want to share what I have planned for season 3. As I said, I'm going to refilm some of my old episodes, but also there's a lot of new releases coming out that I want to cover. So some of them are The Nightingale, Killers of the Flower Moon, White Noise, The Silent Twins, Blonde, She Said, Salem's Lot, The Wonder, and I know there's more, but that's all I could think of. Salem's Lot, by the way, is a Stephen King one. I want to cover it, but I'm worried it'll be too scary for me, which I keep saying that. Like, I guess I've been pushing my scary boundaries lately. There are certain topics I just know I won't cover because I don't want to, because I find it too upsetting. And Salem's Lot is one where I'm a little worried it'll be too scary. So comment down below how scary the book is so I can decide if I do want to cover it or not. But along with those new releases, I definitely want to cover some movies and books that have been out for a while. For example, Stephen King, just talking about Salem's Lot. So I've covered a fair amount of Stephen King in the past year, and I definitely plan on continuing that trend going into season 3. I've been really enjoying reading his books. I also think I want to read Good Omens. This one, I've heard that the book and the TV show are both really funny. And yes, it's a TV show, and I've never covered a TV show before, but I might do it for this one because it does look really good. And yeah, I've heard fantastic things about it, and it's funny, and I want to read more funny stuff going into season 3. And I will also, of course, be covering more books about addiction. I try to do that semi-regularly. So Beautiful Boy, Candy, maybe even Requiem for a Dream, and whatever other ones I come across. So I do really like covering ones that deal with addiction because, again, it has affected my life personally. And so, I don't know, I like the idea of having episodes that help people. Like, I love having episodes where someone comments being like, wow, thank you so much. I was wondering how the book was compared to the movie, and this gave me exactly what I needed. I absolutely love getting those comments so much. They mean so much to me. But I also would love to have a channel that helps people on a deeper level, like people who have a loved one who struggles with addiction, or someone who struggles with addiction who just happens to come across one of my episodes, like Dr. Sleep, I talk about addiction in that one, or, Misery, or there's other ones, The Tender Bar, Another Bullshit Night in Sex City, ones that deal with addiction that they happen to come across and they find it inspirational or helpful or something. I don't know. But that's something going forward into season 3 where I kind of want to, maybe do something more meaningful. I want to have fun doing this, but I also want to focus maybe more on the addiction aspect, since again, that is something I have been affected by personally. And so I can talk more to that. And I just love the thought of doing something that really helps people on a deeper level. Having said that, I'm still going to continue to do the fun stuff and the ones that maybe aren't quite as deep, or maybe they're deep, but they're not about addiction. Anyway, some other upcoming episodes are The Godfather, which if you watched my July reading wrap up, you will know that I hated The Godfather, the book. Also, I talked about it on Instagram, but the movie is incredible, and I have a book first movie coming out. My book first movie episode definitely leans heavily into just being a book rant review, so be prepared. If you love the book, you probably shouldn't watch my video for that. And also, speaking of The Godfather, I also want to cover Casino at some point. It's a Martin Scorsese movie based on a Nicholas Pileggi book. Nicholas Pileggi wrote Wise Guy, which I loved, so I definitely want to cover Casino. And yeah, I made a video a while back of different book first movie pairings I want to cover in the future, and from that video I've only done maybe 2 or 3, so I still want to get to a lot of the ones that I had talked about in that video. But anyway, I might also dabble in fantasy, covering The Hobbit and Chronicles of Narnia. So that would be different because I'm not usually a fantasy person. But anyway, I guess I've rambled on long enough. Again, thank you so much for your support. Comment down below what video brought you to my channel, what has been your favorite book first movie. Just comment any thoughts you happen to have down below. And don't forget to like this video. Don't forget to rate and review my podcast on Apple. And then on Spotify, you can give it a rating. I would love 5 stars, of course. And share my show, my podcast, my YouTube channel with your friends and family to help it continue to grow and to flourish. It would mean so much to me. And just thank you all so much for your support. I cannot stress enough how much it means to me, and I just really appreciate it. So again, thank you, and I will see you next time. Bye.